It was one of those calm golden afternoons where the lake looked like glass and the only sounds were the breeze through the trees and the creak of my dock. I had just finished sealing the deck on my lakefront ranch, the kind of quiet, slow project that makes you appreciate country life. But apparently, peace and quiet wasn't on my neighbor Karen's agenda. You know the type, clipboard in hand, self-appointed sheriff of the HOA, always watching for something to complain about. I figured she'd make a fuss about the stain I used or maybe the color of my shed. I wasn't expecting her to dial 911 at first. I thought she was bluffing. She stood at the edge of my driveway, talking into her phone, pacing like she was reporting a high-stakes emergency. I couldn't hear all the words, but I caught enough to know she was painting a pretty wild picture about me and my property. I didn't think much of it until I saw the flash of red and blue lights bouncing off the lake. 2 sheriff's deputies stepped out of their cruiser, calm but clearly ready to deal with something. I met them halfway down the drive, figuring we'd clear up whatever story Karen had spun. But here's where things got strange. Instead of coming straight to me, one deputy walked right past and went straight to Karen. They asked for her ID. She hesitated, then started raising her voice about her rights and rules and how the HOA has final say over everything. The second deputy just exchanged a look with me like we've been here before. Within minutes, the calm afternoon turned into something you'd expect in a reality TV episode. Karen's face went from smug to panicked as the deputies kept talking. To her, I stood there, trying to figure out what on earth she'd told them to bring this on herself. Then, without warning, one of them reached for her arm. And that's when things took a turn I never saw coming. Karen froze when the deputy touched her arm, like she couldn't believe things were actually happening to her. She kept glancing back at me, as if I'd somehow orchestrated this whole thing. Truth was, I was just as confused. I'd never seen anyone go from calling the cops to being the one in trouble in under 10 minutes now. I've lived on this lakefront property for a few years, and most of my neighbors are great, friendly. Wave when they pass, maybe borrow a tool now and then. But Karen, she's been at it since the day I moved in. First, it was the improper mailbox design. Then, it was the unauthorized garden fence. And now, apparently, sealing my own deck was a violation worthy of police attention. The kicker, my ranch isn't even technically under the HOA's jurisdiction. I'd bought it specifically for that reason. Freedom to take care of my place without someone nitpicking every move. From what little I could hear, the deputies were asking Karen about her complaint, and she was dancing around the details. Something about environmental hazards, dangerous substances, and disturbing the peace. I almost laughed. The only thing I'd disturbed was a family of ducks when I started the power washer. One deputy kept scribbling in his notebook, while the other maintained that steady, calm voice cops use when they're trying to keep things from boiling over. But Karen's tone kept rising, her words spilling faster, more frantic. The more she talked, the more the deputy's expression shifted from listening politely to looking tired. Meanwhile, I was standing there thinking back to earlier that week. She'd been lurking near the property line with a small camera, pretending to document something. I'd brushed it off, figuring she was collecting petty HOA evidence for her next newsletter rant. But now, watching her argue with law enforcement, felt like she'd been planning something bigger. The lake breeze had that strange stillness, the kind you feel right before a storm. The deputies seemed to have made up their minds about something, and Karen must have realized it too, because her voice cracked when she asked, "Wait, am I in trouble?" And that's when everything around us seemed to hold its breath. The deputy didn't answer Karen's question right away. He just kept holding her ID, flipping it over slowly, like he was buying time or letting the silence do the work. Karen tried to fill that silence with more talk about HOA bylaws, unsafe lakefront projects, and how I was supposedly ignoring multiple official notices. But here's the thing. No one else in the neighborhood had ever mentioned these so-called notices. If anything, most folks had warned me early on that Karen's rules only existed in her head. From where I stood, I could see my sealed deck. Gleaming in the sun, the fresh wood stain catching little ripples of light off the lake. I'd chosen that finish because it would protect the boards from the weather and keep the ranch looking good for years. But to Karen, I guess it was some kind of personal challenge. The weird part was, she'd been unusually quiet the past few weeks, right up until the moment she called 911. One of the deputies finally walked over to me, keeping his voice low. He asked if I had any recent run-ins with her. I gave him the short version, the mailbox, the fence, the camera incident. He nodded, like it matched something they already knew. I noticed the other deputy was still with Karen. But now he was writing something down while she gestured wildly toward my property. Then, a different thought started creeping into my mind. This might not have been about my deck at all. Karen had always been territorial about the path that runs along the shore. Technically, it's public access, but she treats it like her personal driveway. Just last month, she'd gotten into it with some teenagers fishing there, claiming they were trespassing when they weren't. Maybe she'd been keeping a list, and I just ended up at the top. The breeze picked up, carrying the faint sound of someone's screen door slamming a few houses down. Neighbors were starting to peek out, drawn by the flashing lights and the scene unfolding. The deputy by Karen tucked her ID into his vest pocket, and she suddenly went quiet. Too quiet. Whatever was about to happen next, I had a feeling it was going to change the whole dynamic on this lake. Karen stood there, her eyes darting between me, the deputies, and the growing number of neighbors drifting toward their driveways. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lakefront, and the air felt heavier, like everyone was waiting for the same thing but didn't know what it was. The deputy with her ID stepped a little closer, speaking in a tone I couldn't quite hear. Whatever he said made her stiffen. I saw her glance toward her house, then back to the lake, like she was calculating some kind of escape. The other deputy positioned himself in a way that subtly blocked her path, which only made the tension spike higher. My dog, who had been quietly lying on the porch, started barking, sensing the shift in energy. Karen's hands moved in quick, jerky motions as she spoke, her voice growing sharper. The neighbors were now openly whispering. A couple from down the road leaned on their fence, exchanging curious looks. Across the lake, the water reflected the scene like a mirror, the flashing lights bouncing in distorted streaks. My sealed deck, the supposed cause of all this, seemed absurdly peaceful compared to the standoff unfolding on my driveway. The deputy who had spoken to me earlier came back, his eyes scanning the situation. He asked me to stay where I was, his voice calm but firm. That's when I realized this had gone way beyond an HOA complaint. He and his partner exchanged a brief nod, like some unspoken plan had just been agreed upon. Karen must have sensed it too, because her tone changed again, part defensive, part pleading. She started talking faster, as if spilling more words could slow whatever was coming. The wind picked up, rustling the trees and carrying her voice in broken fragments down the shoreline. Then, the deputy holding her ID shifted his stance and took one deliberate step toward her. The other mirrored the move, closing in just slightly. The air between them seemed to crackle, and for a split second, the whole world felt balanced on that single moment. Like one more breath, one wrong word, and everything would tip over. The edge, just as the deputies were about to make their next move, a sharp voice cut through the tension from the far end of the road. Everyone turned at once. An older man in a faded fishing hat was hurrying toward us, waving his arms. I recognized him, Tom, who lived 2 houses down and had been on the lake for decades. He almost never got involved in anything, so seeing him stride straight into the middle of this scene was strange enough. "Hold up," he called, his voice carrying over the wind. The deputies paused, one keeping his eyes on Karen while the other turned toward him. Tom's face was flushed, but not from the walk. He looked urgent. "Before you do anything," he said, catching his breath, "you need to know something about her." Karen's reaction was immediate. Her whole posture stiffened and her eyes narrowed. "You stay out of this, Tom," she snapped. But he didn't even glance at her. Instead, he pulled a small, crumpled envelope from his pocket and handed it straight to the deputy holding her ID. The deputy opened it, scanning whatever was inside. His eyebrows lifted slightly, and then his expression went blank again. The kind of neutral look people use when they're processing something big. The neighbors leaned in closer, trying to see without being obvious. Karen's voice rose again, almost frantic now, insisting that whatever was in that envelope was taken out of context and not relevant. But the deputies weren't moving away this time. They were stepping in closer. I caught just enough to know it wasn't about my sealed lakefront deck anymore. Whatever Tom had brought was tied to